Hi, good evening and welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show. We also coming to you live on YouTube. You can get it there on the Guyanese critic page, wherever you are, whatever time it is. Good night, good morning. And also we coming to you on the Daybreak News TBN. Whatever it is that you're doing, I hope that you're having a splendid time preparing for the Christmas. Maybe the rainy weather has you indoors. But we're glad that you're joining us as usual this evening in Guyana. We have a couple of things that we need to talk about tonight. I'm really hurt tonight. I'm really, how you say it? It is not a good thing to wake up and hear news like this, and it's not a good thing to think about families and then the survivors, as I would call them. When you see little children has to be living and thinking that there's no parents. This morning Guyana would have heard the news. They would have read about a couple in Success, East Coast Demerara, walking, going about the business. One is a nurse at GPHC and the other one happens to be, I think it's a driver. Young people in the prime of their life would have had lots of dreams and they were cut down. People were stealing current and the wires were run across the road and they stepped on it. At least that's what the investigations so far have revealed. At the end of the day, 2 people are dead. It speaks a lot about our society, about lawlessness. It speaks about poverty because those people not be stealing. There's no excuse. There's no excuse for breaking the laws. But it is what it is. These are things that we have to address as we go about our business of building this country, of taking it step by step into becoming a modern society, of becoming a first world country. I saw 2 other things that really shook me up as well. Guy with his worker and his boss putting up a Christmas tree. The Christmas tree fell on while they were doing it with the lift. It fell on the high powered lines, and he and his rest of the co-workers got shocked, and he ended up dying. Young man too, in the prime of his life. Little boy, teenager in the Myconi Creek, driving a tractor. I think about 14 years old. Tractor overturned, pinned, died. In Berbice, thinking Blackbush Bowler. 2 people riding in the night, 20s, 18, 20, very early in the 20s. The motorbike went into the trench and 1 person died, left in the trench here. We could do without some of these things happening. We have to be a little more careful. We have to do better as citizens in this country. I believe that a lot of these things that happen, we could avoid it if we just understand that we have to be responsible citizens. I want to say good night to my co-host Freddie Kissoon. There's a big news that is happening. One, the $750 million deal, and we'd have to find some experts to talk about it with our FARS deal. I don't think there's enough discussion that would have happened there, but we have to come back to that. The other thing is that hurts my heart to the very core is the COI that's going on right now. Very profound experience it would be for the historians to listen what is transpiring in the COI, yet we seem to be missing the big picture here. 5 months of hell in Guyana, and we're not paying enough attention to what's happening. The media seems to be sleeping. Got to do a little better than that. There's some earth-shattering revelation that's coming out from that, things that we knew about, what's now being confirmed. It shows you what role who was playing during those 5 months. Tonight I want to say, of course, again, repeat, good night to Freddie Kissoon, who's going to do the honor and introduce a man who played a very impacting role also. He was one of the guardians during the elections of 2020. And tonight Freddie Kissoon, my co-host, is going to do the honors of introducing him.
Good evening, wherever you are. I think it's the wrong word, I believe Leonard set a modeling somber theme, which of course is important because of the contents of that theme. And there is one more one more tragedy I have to add to that. And I'll ask our guest to indulge me. Obviously, Leonard didn't know about this. A very, very nice young man that I like immensely. We're personal friends. I taught him at UG. His father was one of the big executives when the telephone company was in state hands. And this gentleman's just a lovely guy. He knew my mother-in-law well. This young man wanted a gun license, and he went through the process in which a very connected person was bypassing the system and giving people documents. And they gave Adam Lynch, he gave Adam Lynch a documents, and when Adam Lynch went to the police commissioner, you have to go to the police commissioner himself. That's the final stage, and then you get the permit. The police commissioner discovered that the documents were not in order. Adam Lynch was arrested and spent 2 days in the police station. And when he was bailed, a couple hours after, he digested poison. The line between sanity and insanity is very thin. You can lose your sanity if you see something happen to your relatives or even your pet. I don't know what happened to Adam Lynch after being arrested for 2 days, but the person that Adam Lynch believed in turned out to be a con artist. Well, he's genuinely connected, and so that should be an investigation. Now let's conclude that somber theme from the sad now to the sublime. This evening, if you're anywhere near Laluni Street, we're at the corner of Laluni and Irvin. If you're at the fast food outlet and you're listening to this program, if you're anywhere in Laluni, around Alberton, Queenstown, please buy a small cake. Come at the door of the studio. It says TBN Guyana. That's the platform, the company we operate with, Daybreak News. Please urgently bring anything you want, because today is Gildarie's birthday. So I knew it was coming, but I forgot when it was, else please I would have bought a cake. So please, if you're listening, send a cake or something, so on screen we can have a little thing. Please, today is Gildarie's birthday. I repeat again, please bring something at the studio, knock at the gate, or call my cell phone when you reach the gate. My cell phone is 614-5927. Just knock on the door. Please bring something. Let's celebrate this birthday. Our guest this evening is a person, as Leonard said, that was one of the guardians of democracy when 5 months were raining down in Guyana, in which, after decades, we were witnessing once more rigged elections. We have him here.
Hold. Something went wrong. Continue. Okay.
I think we had a brief interruption. Our operator told us that. Our guest this evening is a young medical doctor who rose through the ranks of one of the opposition parties, a new and united Guyana, Anug, which was formerly headed by popular attorney and popular politician Ralph Ramkaran. Dr. France is a medical doctor and played no small part in his party in keeping the eyes of the world on Guyana. He was recently elected as the chairman of Anug. Now, since Anug doesn't have the title of official leader, the chairman is de facto leader. So we will talk tonight about parliamentary affairs, Anug, and politics in general. Dr. France, welcome to the program.
Good night, Mr. Kissoon. Good night and happy birthday to you, Freddie.
Well, I don't know if this will take away from the seriousness of the program. You know how people stay. If we sing a song, I don't know.
No, don't sing no song. Freddie Kissoon, you step out the bounds by asking for cake, but it's all right.
Well, I'm asking them again.
Get the people business.
Fast food, cake, ice cream, anything.
Don't bother with them. If you listen, don't do that.
Please come to we're at Irving And the Looney Street, there's a big church there, Church of the Nazarene. We're the next building after the Church of the Nazarene, opposite the famous accountancy building, Bahadur. Please bring something before the show end, and we'll have a little birthday thing. Knock on the door or call my cell phone, 614-5927. There's so much to discuss tonight, and we took the young man's time.
Let me get straight into it, Doc. There's a COI going on right now into the 2020 elections. Have you been called to give any evidence and to testify before that COI?
Good night to all of the viewers. Good night to all of those who are tuned in, be it in Guyana, be it overseas. To answer your question directly, Mr. Gildarie, no, I haven't been called, nor have I volunteered my services, because initially they were looking for volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I have not. One may ask why.
That's a question.
Right? So, one of the big issues that I see in Guyanese politics and in governance on the whole is the non-inclusion of the opposition in decision making. And this is a main pillar of what a new United Guyana stands for. We believe in shared governance, and then I guess Mr. Kissoon will come back with that question sometime during the interview. We believe that the opposition needs to have more of a say in governance. And they have shot themselves in the foot with regard to their behavior.
But you're part of the opposition, so it has to be the PNC.
Well, it's the opposition in general, so I would not take Anug out of it, because we're part of the opposition indeed. But for example, the COI that we currently have, there was a great cry by the major opposition, the APNU AFC, with regard to the terms of reference of the committee that has been set up and the timeline with regard to when they are investigating what period of the elections. It's more centered on after the vote and the recount, whereas the opposition has highlighted deficiencies in the system from way before, deficiencies in GCOM, which I concur with them. Right? The majority of the issues that we see is because of GCOM's inconsistency in carrying out their work as is programmed, as is guided by the Constitution. And that is why when I hear persons blaming a certain political party, and both sides have done it, of rigging the election, whether it's the PPP of rigging the election or the APNU AFC of rigging the election, I take issue with it. Because really and truly, neither of these two main opposition groups have direct control over the election machinery. Yes.
Are you saying that the PNC or the APNU FC had no control over the 2020, what we saw, what the world saw?
I'm not saying that they didn't have control. I am saying that there is a body, a constitutional body, that is responsible for the management of elections in Guyana, with their principal actors being a chair and a
commission. So let me hear back that statement. I want to be sure that I hear you right. Go ahead.
With the principal actors being the chair and the commission, which guides the actual admin aspect of the body that is run by the CEO and the other staff. Right? It is the CEO who actually carries out the work of GCOM. And it starts all the way from when you're registering, when you have claims and objection, when you're producing a preliminary list, then the official list of electors, the activities on E-Day, the count afterwards, and when you release the results. No political figure, be it the government, whomever is in president, the executive, in presidency, the executive, or leader of the opposition, should have any control over that. Because the Constitution clearly guides us on what is the mandate of GCOM. Right? And that is why many of the leaders in the opposition can say that, you know what, former President David Granger would have always mentioned that he's going to stick by what the Constitution says, and he's going to wait on GCOM to give a result. Yes, there may be persons who could have advocated for a specific result, which the public out there is well aware would have happened, right? But there is a time whereby you can address such issues. And we currently have a case in the court, right? And that is the means by which we can address such issues. And that is why I believe if there is anyone who is to be punished for everything that has gone on for the 5 months post-March 2020, it is the officials in GCOM.
If I may, Freddie, I know that you want
Yeah,
to
sure, no, go ahead.
I just wanted
No, go ahead.
So there are two separate issues, in my view, that you're talking about here. You're talking about GCOM's system, or systems that they have in place. And as we spoke, I think Freddie Kissoon was in the studio on March the 2nd at Kaicho Radio when we were trying to understand what was playing out. And everybody, till to the end of the day, was stating that it was a good run elections, very well organized, very well done. The issue that you had, that everybody saw play out, is when it came down to Region 4 and the tabulation that played out there, and the reading out from the spreadsheet and the bed sheet which it graduated to. So you could ask or you could raise issues about the actual the actual list of voters, the voters list, if you want to call it that. But you can't bring into question when everybody, all the experts that we hear, and Freddie would have spoken to a couple of them, saying that the system that GCOM has, it's very well protected, it is strong, it's robust. And the only thing to go wrong is if the people within there has an intention to do wrong, they will do wrong, and there's no protection against that. How do you respond to something like that? Because that's the issue that I see.
But that is indeed the issue. It is the actors of GCOM who would have contributed.
So how do you protect yourself against something like that?
By having laws and ways and means whereby you can address the deficiencies in those officers who do not carry out their job.
But an officer who decides to go rogue, Freddie, and maybe you'd want to jump in there, you could have a president in place, and you could have a cabinet of ministers, and if all of them, they're supposed to do things according to the law, but if they decide not to go according to the law because they already have evil intentions, how do you guard against, how does a country guard against something like that?
Well, I don't want to comment on that and eat into his time. I want to ask, so I will come back to that. But I want to look at two issues briefly, and that would be in the form of a question. One is that every prime minister or president comes from a political party. The Prime Minister of Britain is the head of the Conservative Party. But when the Prime Minister of Britain goes to a climate conference, it's not the head of the Conservative Party going there. And I think the conceptual mistake you have made is that no political party has planned the format and the configurations of a commission of inquiry into the election. That's the state of Guyana. That's the Attorney General. So you can't say, if you're going to say, Dr. France, if you're going to use the concept, if you're going to collapse the head of government, a minister, and collapse the status into the party status, then that's global confusion, because the Attorney General walks in to the High Court, not as Anil Nandalal, an executive member of the PPP. So I agree with the format of the Commission of Inquiry. It is a state inquiry in which people could be charged for misbehaving in the inquiry. The second thing is, I was in Grenada, Dr. France, when the Grenadian Revolution imploded in October 1983. And I learned one thing from that. I was an advisor to the government. And I learned one thing. If you tell somebody in life, but especially in politics, if the Prime Minister tells his deputy, I am going to get you, you're doing nonsense in this government, that guy is going to say to himself, I will get him before he gets to me. And that is how the Grenadian Revolution imploded. The Prime Minister and the Economic Minister said to each other, I can get you. When our opposition prevents a minister from going and giving development resources to communities, when the opposition leader, come on Dr. France, basically all over the world people shake hands. If Zelensky and Putin have to talk, they're going to go into that majestic room and all the cameras and they're going to shake his hand. Are you going, how are you going to ask the opposition that is in a recalcitrant mood like that to sit down on the table and discuss configurations, compartments, dimensions of a process? You're never going to come out of that room because it's going to be total obstructionism.
I like your way of thinking, Mr. Kissoon. What I can say is that if we continue along that vein, we will not get anywhere. And that is where maturity as politicians, and let me get to Leonard's point that he made. The Constitution is there, but there are no systems of punishment if you don't obey the Constitution. Right? And for me, I personally believe, and this is not Anug's point of view, this is Dr. Mark Francis' point of view, that there has to be some format there whereby if you don't adhere to the Constitution, that you can be charged, you can be put before the courts, or you can be suspended or disbarred from whatever position they say that you have.
But isn't that what happened? There's a couple of people there before the court right now. Lowenfield is before the court. I think Myers is before the court. Walter Lawrence is before the court.
Well, it's to be seen. It's to be seen if the Constitution adequately covers such demeanors, such injustices, if I may put. But what has happened is that the Constitution was framed in such a manner that we see our politicians and our representatives as higher beings with moral standing. And that is not what's happening. If we have persons who are elected, persons who are collecting a salary to represent a significant portion of the Guyanese population, and you can see that is within your right to represent your people in a certain manner by sitting at a table with the government, by making plans, addressing issues that are affecting the Guyanese people. If you want to be one-sided, then our country is going nowhere. You mentioned that it is the job of the Attorney General, and I like your use of the post of the Attorney General. Anug, why I joined Anug? It is because of the system of governance that I bought into, which is something new, which is something different from what we currently have here. It was a system that was explained to me by none other than Mr. Henry Jeffrey, Dr. Henry Jeffrey, and I know you had Tim on the show, and you ask him for a system where you have a perfect democracy, a system that actually works, right? And he didn't answer the question. You mentioned India, you mentioned the States, you mentioned all the big countries. The system that I had bought into, and which I would like for Guyana sometime in the future, is the Swiss system. In the Swiss system, and I will not go into the intricacies of that system, you have an Attorney General who is very powerful, but is independent of government. He is independent of the executive. Therefore, it is a man who will not have a biased opinion. Here we have an Attorney General who is a minister within the government.
Which happens all over the world.
Party.
So don't knock Guyana.
I am
AGs from the Republican Democratic Party, the AG in UK, the AG in India. I just don't want people to think Guyana is the worst.
It's not. We have our system. We have our mixed system. But what I'm saying is that I have found a system which is different, which can have an Attorney General that is not biased, that does not belong to any one of the political parties. And such a leader, such an Attorney General may be able to bring the two sides together. But it is more political willpower that is lacking amongst our two warring factions, if I may put it that way. They have not matured enough since 1966 and maybe a couple of years before, and I don't see them maturing enough anytime in the near future. And what the main opposition is doing is only shooting themselves in the foot and giving the government, who has boundless resources now, a route to staying in power for the next 10, 15 years. Unless our younger population, that swing vote, that 35,000 vote, can create a minority government by supporting a force that does not think along those lines. And that is where Anug comes in.
Doc, have you studied examples like what would have played out in Suriname, where there are how you say it, alliances, because no one party could rule. You don't have the majority. Have you seen the examples of that and what that would have done to the country and whether those were good models? Have you seen any examples around the world that you think would probably work for a country like Guyana, which is so divided?
So I love your question. The different systems of governance. Mr. Kissoon, I'm in politics for the next 20 years. So I have been preparing from a very young age.
I wish you were.
I have read as much as I can, and I will continue to read and educate myself on systems of governance around the world. Yes, so we have the system that you're probably talking about in Israel that has caused an election every year, 2 times a year maybe.
Italy.
In Italy, in France, in Germany.
Is that a good
Right.
thing for development? I want to ask you that. Because by the time you start your programs, your financial programs, the projects and so on, and you have a new government, how does that work?
The plus of the system is that it gives independence to more persons, a variety of persons. Yes, you may have to be skillful negotiators to form a government if you have all of these minority factions warring together. But it is possible. What may be affected is your agenda that you have, because one grouping, for example, may want to see this being done. And we currently have the example of France, where the extreme right has a very huge say in what is going to be put forward.
Marine Le Pen.
You see the problem that I have
They
with
actually
that?
have a new leader.
Yeah.
Freddie,
No,
we don't have...
he's the leader of the
Freddie
party.
Kissoon, he's the leader of the
She
party.
can be the leader, but there's something I want to ask you, but I mean, Gildarie was absent Friday, so he needs to be.
No. But there's a fundamental issue with that model there. Our system here, we know how the public sector is linked to politics in Guyana. And we know that whenever elections time come up, if you have elections next year, April, you better make sure that from now you're going to see some problems. You might, during the election time, nothing happens. It takes a couple months before it happens again. So you always going to find yourself in which the public sector, if you have a situation again, I'm talking about the culture in Guyana, nothing happens. You can't, if you have a minority government, and that is something that we'd have to live with, unless we change our culture in a very, very quick manner, you ain't going to have no development. I don't think it's going to foster development.
I totally disagree with you, Mr. Gildarie. The AFC lost a great opportunity to change the dynamics of this country. And because of their behavior, they would have shut down third parties, maybe for 5 years or for 10 years. But there's always going to be room for third parties. The big issue with Guyana and Guyana's politics, our system that we have, is that we basically have a winner-take-all system, whereby whomever it is that has 51% of the votes, they control everything. In a country
And
where...
that is not the pattern of the world. We'll come to that. That is the pattern of the world in a big global power called India. A whole set of powerful democratic countries. Our neighbor Brazil, when Timothy Jonas was here, I said to Timothy Jonas, you are talking about a system that is normal around the world. India is 1.3 billion people, and it has a winner-take-all.
It is
and it's
normal.
a powerful government
It is
in the world.
normal, but is it the best system?
Well, let's
Right? What happens in these larger democracies is that the various institutions are much more empowered. So, for example, the winner, you may win an election in the United States and you may not have the plurality of the votes, as has happened in the past, because of the electoral system. But for you to have your agenda to go, it got to go through the various houses, right? For you to have
We have
laws
that,
passed, and that's what I'm saying.
public
The
accounts
difference,
committee is headed by an opposition.
Mr. Gildarie, you can't honestly speak, and this is what the PPP songbook is going to state, that we have inclusionary democracy because we have the Integrity Commission, because we have the Procurement Commission, because we have the Police Service Commission, the PSC,
which is Commonwealth institutions
But-
we have adopted.
But how how do they function?
That was the question
How
I
much?
wanted to ask you.
How are their powers? For example, the integrity committee. If a person in public office does not submit or does not make their declaration, what powers do they have to force that person to do it? We've seen examples in the past whereby year on year persons refuse to submit their declarations, and that is it. Yes,
I don't have a problem with that. I know what
the
you say.
PPP who is
I'm
in
just
government,
talking about this with all system that you feel is peculiar to Guyana. But there's something I want to ask you, and I ask Leonard to give me a few minutes here. I think one has to be careful when one repeats this, I think, historical myth. It's two warring factions, and they're after each other's throat. I think that is a sociological myth, or political distortion. If you bring an Indian rights activist in the studio, there was one called Ravi Dev, and there's one called named Vishnu Besram, and maybe we can get Swami Sharanand and what. If you examine our history, it's been a history of political violence on the election results that has consequences for Indian people. And I keep hearing this thing about warring factions, but look, from 97, the PPP had problems that resulted in the massacre of Indian people in Wismar. So 60, violence on Indian people, attack on legitimate government. 64, the same. Then from 64, rigged elections in which opposition PPP was kept out until 1992. I was on the street as a journalist with Colin Smith from the Celtic Standard, and I saw the violent attacks by PPP, by PNC officials breaking Indian stores. Then there was 97, in which something was born called No Fire, Slow Fire. And Ravi Dev and his group documented the hundreds of assaults on Indian people. Then we had 2002 to 2006 massacre of Indian people in Buxton. And then we've had the 2020 election. But let me tell you what I think has happened. There are vast amount of people, particularly the Creole middle class, that have fostered this narrative on warring factions that fight each other. But I'm saying Mr. Ravi Dev and many Indian rights activists would say there's no two warring factions. There is something called the Indian security dilemma, and they have borne the brunt of historical violence, and there's an opposition that participates in election. Instead of rejecting election and finding alternative modes, they participate in election. Then from 1992, not accepting the election results. We had the private sector commissioner, Jerry Gavaya, who said in 2006, everything went all right. And yet there were attempted violence, and he had to take a delegation into Congress Place and plead with the opposition leader, Mr. Corbyn, not to create violence. How long more are we going to tolerate this historical assault on democracy and Indian people? It has to come to an end. So I don't agree with this two warring faction.
It falls back on political maturity. Robert Corbyn was mature in 2006.
Yes, Mr. Gavaya said that. Mr. Gavaya said that.
Accept the result and had enough power to stop his supporters from going on the road and doing damage.
So that's the one that we were spared.
That's the one that we were spared. Right. And
but we were spared 2011 and 2015
because
nobody burned on anything because the PNC won. When is the PNC going to stop this? And you have
when you look at who may have faced the most damage, who may have suffered the most, the Indo-Guyanese population, it's facts, it's out there, are the ones who have suffered the most. But the Afro-Guyanese villages and population can say the same. There were moments whereby their properties would have been attacked.
What?
Yes.
From which election?
When
Which
they,
period?
before 66, when they...
You're going back to... You're talking about...
That's what I'm saying.
I am not...
That is where it's birthed
I am going to concede that, but I thought you were coming down
that is why
after independence.
the grandparents can tell their kids and their grandkids the bad of the PNC, which has evolved into the APNO AFC, and similarly, the other set can tell you about the bad things that the other government, other political party would have done, and that is where we are in Guyana. What happened is that
No, Dr. Frank, we're not there. That generation is gone.
Exactly. I was born in 85. Burnham died in 85. Right? So no one can come and tell me about Burnham. I have not lived through it. I have lived through everything that happened after Burnham. I was a kid, so I wouldn't know anything that happened on the Hoyt really. But I can tell you everything that happened from 92 going forward. I have seen all of the changes that have happened. I have seen all of the violence that has happened. Right? And I am able to make an independent judgment for myself. Not everyone is able to. Because many persons may not be as educated as I am, may not have read their history as I have done. And as such, they listen to others who influence their behaviors. And that is the work that political leaders, that village leaders, that religious leaders, that we have to do. We have to educate our population. The more educated population we have, the less we will rely on tribal politics.
It is interesting, and I want to ask you, I read somewhere over the weekend that attorney at law, Nigel Hughes, would have brought out a report that speaks of Afro-Guyanese being sidelined, especially when it comes to contracts in Guyana. Your thoughts on the wider context. I want to ask you, do you believe that the Afro-Guyanese in Guyana have justifications in saying that they have been targeted, they have been discriminated against, and your thoughts on that attempt by, I think, that organization that wanted to have a discussion on apartheid?
The general narrative is that whenever one side is in government, there is favoritism to their supporters.
I'm asking what you think.
Right? So the economic aspects of the society, and we have a small country where government controls everything. 80% of the contract, 80% of the spending out there is controlled by government. Right? The system...
80% of government
almost.
Contract? Well, it's government's contract. Right? It has to be government.
So, where the issue is...
I think he meant infrastructure.
Well, not infrastructure alone, spending on the whole.
80% of spending.
Right? There are ways and means, it may be covertly in some aspect, of having favorites, of giving more to a certain side. But there is nothing that really stops anyone, be it an Afro-Guyanese, an Indo-Guyanese, an Amerindian Guyanese like myself, or someone of mixed heritage, from attempting, from trying, from creating the links. And so a fellow PC brother of mine, James Bond, was on your show, President's College. Right? He was on your show. James has is a lawyer who is established in his own right, but has recently gone into business. Right? And he is trying to get more young non-Indo-Guyanese, I may say,
he said that,
to get into business. Because this is one of the ways and means whereby you can right the wrongs of the past, and you can build for yourself and your future, be it your kids, your family, your village, right? So really and truly, there are no barriers, but there are certain institutions that favor certain ethnicities of Guyanese and make it easier for them. And Mr. Kissoon, you have a big issue with the banks. And these are one of the major, is one of the major institutions that has this issue.
I don't agree with you. And my issue with the banks is a legal, moral one. It's not associated with your description of how the banks operate.
What did he say? My understanding of what the doctor...
I think you're right, that the bank... But my thing about the bank is the onerous
But would
conditions.
he have grounds to say what
The
he
numbers-
no,
the numbers are there.
no. He has to.
The numbers are
no,
there.
No, it's Leonard.
If we look at how contract,
Leonard, this is very, very profound and complex research. You have to do the research. You cannot go into a bank and ask for a loan without collateral. Now, I believe that the amount of applications to the bank, okay, are predominantly Indians. That's because they know what are the prerequisites. You put up your house as collateral and the house is worth $20 million. That is why Ravi Dev is asking for ethnic impact statements. You see those people who writing and talking about an apartheid state and writing the U.S. Vice President, they're going to look stupid with the U.S. Vice President. The U.S. Vice President is going to pick up the phone and call 2 or 3 researchers from top universities and say the State Department is financing you, go down there. Dr. Taran Kemraj, who worked with me at UG, did a study of poverty among ethnic groups. And this is a misconception that when you see people in Georgetown and you see Africans how they're badly off in Georgetown, you got to go to Rossignol and elsewhere. The poverty, cancer exists almost equally in African Guyanese and Indian Guyanese, and Taran Kemraj did a study on that. Here is the problem with the bank. I think the bank criteria are very stringent, and therefore African Guyanese do not meet the criteria. You know, we keep talking, I'm sorry to take up your time, but you know, this thing, you are a perfect example. You, Leonard Gildarie, is a perfect example that you have to leave a situation and apply yourself. When you left Kaicho, which is just a few years ago, you were earning just about 150 or 160. Now look at you now. You're in a very productive private business. Okay? Now I believe that African Guyanese do not emulate that kind of spirit like you. They like university job, police job, etc. And if they're going to continue along that trend, then you're not going to have as many Africans coming out of journalism like you and ending up like you. And I think that kind of mythical analysis has to be extirpated, and you look at ethnic impact statements. How many African companies get this? How many Africans get scholarship? And you need to publish it. I genuinely believe that African Guyanese are at a disadvantage when it comes to meeting the criteria. How we change that, Leonard, I don't know.
It's going to be difficult. You can't change it.
But why? My question is why? Is it they lack the information? So Mr. Gildarie is your example. Who would he have spoken to? Where did he get his connection with regard to what is it that you need? Why is it that an Afro-Guyanese may not have the same $20 million house to lodge in the bank if that is the main collateral that is needed?
Dr. Mark France, you have a converter in me, but you know what's the disastrous consequences of that? The disastrous consequences of that, and this thing about
educating the population?
The disastrous consequences of that is when you take state funds. I believe, and I said it on this program, there should be a bank or there should be state funds to create an African peasantry, a landed peasantry, and an African petty bourgeoisie. But the problem, and I don't have the skills, that have to be very, very good economic planners. I don't know how you're going to do that. And then 20,000 East Indians say, Well, what happened to me? I am
Well,
just
I
as
was
poor
about
as
to
him.
raise that with you.
I am poor as him.
How do you do
But
that?
I'm not asking.
I got poor
I am
Indian
not
families,
asking
Dr. France.
for an Afro-centered bank or an Afro-centered
I
agency.
wish they had one. I am asking.
I
for
am
that.
asking that whatever is available to the Indo-Guyanese, and if it is the business community who may have the experience, who may have the connection, what is stopping them from sharing it with other sectors of the Guyanese population? Dr. Kemraj did mention about the poverty in Guyana. Do you know who are the poorest or the poorest ethnicity in Guyana?
Amerindians.
The Amerindians. And I have had a wonderful opportunity of visiting almost the
But
entire
I know
country. Because I work at the Ministry's Bond.
Amerindian ethnicity.
I am Amerindian. I have other ethnicity, but I claim Amerindian.
Okay.
Right? But I have a big issue with.
So we have two political parties headed by Amerindians. We have two political parties in Guyana headed by Amerindians.
When my politics come into the forefront, I refuse to be Amerindian. Because I will not go along the line of the PPP, which is seen as an Indo-Guyanese party, and then the leaders, President Finale is going to come and say, but you know what, we have more Amerindians than you guys, we have more Afro-Guyanese than you guys. But that is how it's seen. The APNU AFC is seen as an Afro-Guyanese party. The LJP would have come over as a party that is representing the Amerindian vote. I don't want the continuation of such politics. I want to be seen as a Guyanese who is representing all. And that is why
Can't agree with you more.
I
Can't
refuse to be sidelined into one ethnic group. And that is my vision, that is my hope for a new united Guyana. We must be seen as the party that represents each and every Guyanese.
Interesting discussions indeed, and you know.
Please
Freddie,
bring your ice cream or your
Stop
fast
this
food.
nonsense.
Oh, please
Stop
bring a
begging.
cake today. Let me just join us.
You see?
Today is Leonard Gildarie's birthday.
You
Please
see?
bring
Don't bother listening to
please
this.
bring something at the studio, please.
You see,
we
I
still have
like
time.
something, Mr. Kissoon. If that cake comes and it's worth over a certain amount of money, I can't partake in it. Given that I am now a politically exposed figure and I'm not supposed to receive gifts over a certain amount, how many other politicians will go say
You
the
can't
same?
tell me eating it.
Well, you're actually using terms that are not applicable.
It is applicable, but
No.
probably not enforced.
I don't see how somebody giving you a piece of cake is an inducement.
No, I think he's just kidding.
Oh,
No, no,
okay.
but Freddie,
Just say it.
Freddie,
Similarly,
yeah, go on,
it
go
may
on,
be- it
go
may
on,
be-
Leonard.
It may be a gold bangle if it
Go
was
on.
my birthday.
Gold bank, you want to bring that up. But Freddie, you raised a very fundamental issue there, whether our Afro-Guyanese, and I would like some continuation of the talks on it, because whether they have a preference to head into certain areas, whether it's in the private arena, the private sector, by working, and they're not too interested in owning their own business, because maybe that's how they were brought up. I would like to have that, but you're right in saying those are impact statements is going to guide us
That needs to be studied.
determine. So the government of the day and the authorities that are in place could make the right decision from a scientific basis, and I would like to see that. And I
We
think
need-
you're saying it's an interesting
I work at
discussion.
We need
I work
studies.
at UG for
Yes,
26 years.
I'm bringing up UG.
And the applications have to go in front of the board of which I was a member. 100 applications for sociology, 98 are Africans. 100 applications for management and marketing, 98 are Indians. You know, if you look carefully over the past 20 years, do you know there are now more African Guyanese lawyers coming out than Indian lawyers? The African Guyanese seem to gravitate towards the profession. Martin Luther King and the African leaders in the United States, Jesse Jackson, those are one of the things they keep emphasizing, and I would say there has to be a type of leadership in Guyana, and it could be done by Offerali. I'm not talking he has to be African Guyanese. I am an Indian, and I believe they should have an African bank and African institution to create this. I don't believe it should be done at the Indian expense or the Amerindian expense. But I believe this is one of the way of solving, of getting African people to get into business.
I don't share your point of view. I believe that if any such organization, institution is set up, it should be for all Guyanese. Our issue that we have, I was very lucky to attend President's College, and it's a school that has persons of various ethnicities.
But why you don't want the state to help create an African?
Where the issue is in our education system. We don't educate our youngsters enough on business, on the different technologies, right? The career days that were a thing of the past. We don't pay or we don't focus enough attention there. So someone comes out, they write a couple of subjects, they went into a certain stream, and they're just hoping for the normal job. So I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a police, a teacher, whatever it is. But who is there to open up their eyes to the technologies of the 21st century so that they can make an informed decision? They can get into business. These are the areas, and it's a very simple solution. Similarly, for the sports, we don't have anyone who is showing the Guyanese youth the avenues that are open in sports and culture. You've had culture activists on your show quite recently, right? We don't pay enough attention to them, and if you want to be portrayed as a country that is developing, that is becoming first world, these are areas that you need to look into.
You know what's interesting, Doc? Freddie, Doc and I spoke a little. Dr. France works at the Georgetown Public Hospital. He is sitting here in the studio today as a leader of Anug. And he could be critical of government, and he would voice his opinion. This is a good thing for the country. How has it been for you? Have you found that your position as Anug has put you at odds with the powers that be, the government?
I would hope not.
Tolerant?
I would hope not.
Your position?
I would hope not, because if it happens, this forum is at your disposal. I would hope
So
not.
my question to you directly, I really want to think, is the Fanali government been showing tolerance of views that might not necessarily be theirs?
So I'm going to give you a bit of my history to come with the answer, because I'm finally going to reach it. I have been a scholarship student from the age of 11. In 1997, when I wrote the common entrance, as it was known then, right, I earned a scholarship as being the best hinterland student. That is how I went to President's College. After President's College, I would have worked for 2 years. I taught at the New Amsterdam Technical Institute, and I taught at New Amsterdam Secondary School. And then I earned another scholarship to study medicine in Cuba as part of that big batch of half-baked doctors. I got a big issue with that column that you had in 2016.
Well, that's my experience. I've seen all
Messengers of Death. We're actually running the show now, so. But yes, I had this scholarship. I came back in 2013.
You research me.
Mr. Gildarie and Kissoon, it is my job to know everyone.
Okay, fine.
Right?
You know,
I know, and I know all the responses that were there. I can tell you everything that former President Barjaglia said in response to that column that you made.
You're a good. That's the hallmark of a good politician.
No,
do your research.
You've had two leaders here, a past leader and a current leader of Anug, who were on your show, and they're, I would say, recalcitrant politicians. They don't want to be politicians, but they're leaders, right? I want to be a politician. It is my job to know. And if I have to spend hours, weeks in the morning, reluctant politicians. John, who is my very good friend, by the way, Jonathan Yearwood,
okay.
right, a past leader of Anug. He wanted to do good for the country, but not necessarily through politics. Tim was on your show. Yeah. Tim said that, okay, he doesn't really want to be a politician, probably he's forced to be one. If I could let a cat out of the bag, Tim, whose father would have supported the PNC all his life, is probably the best candidate to be the leader for APNU FC and win an election. If they had any sense, this is what they would do. But he's with Anug, and we're very thankful because he is. So, I've been a scholarship student. I came back in 2013, and I have worked with the government since. 2013 under the PPP government, and after 2015 to 2020 under the APNU FC. I have had no issues with regard to my beliefs, with regard to how I express myself under either of the two, right? And I was very close with the Ministers of Health for both the APNU FC and the PPPC. For example,
The Amerindian connection, George Norton.
Dr. Norton, who is
That's my friend.
the uncle of one of my batchmates.
Still remains my
Right?
friend.
Minister Walla Lawrence, when she was there. I'm going to let something else out of the bag tonight. When Minister Lawrence made that infamous statement
I only give it PNC people work.
of it came out as jobs for the PNC people, and I'm looking for a young doctor for a certain position. Do you know who was the young doctor that was chosen?
You.
It was me. And I'm not a card-bearing member of the PNC. I'm not a card-bearing member of the PPP. But it is because of what those persons saw in me. Similarly, I was at the recount, and I would have worked for Anug and highlighted all of the issues there, and also guarding the boxes to ensure that the votes are not tampered with. And Minister Anthony, well, he was not minister then, was sitting right below me. And we have always had cordial conversations, and we still do. And so after the entire election issue, I continued working at the MMU, and I would have assumed the role of,
What's MMU?
it's the Material Management Unit.
Of
It's
the
the drug
Ministry of
one,
Health.
basically.
Where the stock on
The
the
drug one.
medicines and so on.
Oh, you work there at the
Yes,
moment?
I
central
work there.
storage area.
It's a central storage
So you
area.
don't look at patients at the hospital?
No, that is what I did in the past. So since August of this year, I'm back at the GPHC.
Okay.
Right? But I have had a wonderful working relationship with the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health, Mr. Watkins. We get along very well. Similarly with what I go and tell people, the 4 ministers of health. Minister Anthony, Dr. Leslie Ramsamy, Dr. Mahadio, who is the one who's in the region, and Dr. Berry. Right? So I haven't had an issue, and it's because I challenge them. I am a pensionable employee, means I'm with the commission. I dare you to fire me. I dare you to give me something to talk about, because it's only going to make me grow.
I like this young man.
But I hope that nothing.
I could be doing much better in a private practice or doing work on my own in various
I would
fields.
certainly, this forum would certainly at your disposal, if now that you assume the leadership of Anug, we see things going, no, that can't go on, no.
And I have no issue in calling out either of the 2 major political parties. As a matter of fact, you don't find many persons who are young, Amerindian, well-spoken, and qualified to a certain level.
You have a family?
I don't have a family of my own, but I have my immediate family with my siblings and my mom.
Okay.
Right? My dad would have dedicated his entire life to the teaching services, worked in all of the interior location. Right? So I always say that whatever I have earned from the government has already been paid for by daddy. But I have been working since 2013 in my own right in the public system. Right? So I am paying back everything that was given to me. So nothing is free.
We have about 6 minutes more. Freddie, you want to get a question fast before we ask him?
Yeah, how you were elected, you were by consensus or there was competition? I know you recently
We have a democratic system, and I want to highlight this. Anug is one of the few, if not the only party to have had 2 internal elections according to our constitution since the 2020 general election. Because our constitution states as it is, and we're trying to do some constitutional reform of our own, for a 1-year term. Right? So we had an internal election, now we have a second one. Many of the other parties, including many of the smaller ones,
you have had an election for the past
for decades.
88 years. Dr. France, has Anug incorporated term limits for leaders?
We have. So currently our constitution says that you can serve 2 term limits of 1 term each, and then you have to come out, and then you can go back after a 1 year.
Okay.
Right? We're trying to do some amendments.
So the next
because
2 years,
there's only so much you can get
so
done
the next 2
in a
years,
year.
Dr. France would not be the chairman of and
Well, it can be as soon as the next year, because it's a 1-year term limit.
Okay.
So next year, November, we will be having the next election, and hopefully the systems that I'm putting in place, because I don't want Anug to be seen as the Timothy Jonas party, the Ralph Ramperan party, the Mark France party. I want Anug to be seen as the viable third option. I want it to be seen as a party with a system in place, transparency, accountability, a party that reaches out to everyone, be it from the major opposition, be it from the government, be it from the smaller parties. The parties are the individuals who want to form parties, because I want to bring everybody to work together. That is the vision.
Thank you very much, Dr. France. In closing, we just got about a minute or so left. If you were to reach your finale, President your finale, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and the agenda would have to be your recommendations for him to better this country. Give me about 3 things at the top of your head you'd want to say.
Well, quickly, we need to adhere to what is it in our constitution. So one of the first thing is fixing the third arm of government, the judiciary. We cannot have a system whereby for 17 years we have not appointed a chancellor and the chief justice. The other thing is reaching out in a meaningful way to the opposition. Ralph was on your show and he may say that Aubrey is laying the groundwork for future talks. I don't want Aubrey to come to you. You be the bigger person. Reach out to them, bring them to the table, and when they don't want to come,
But you don't want to shake the man's hand.
when they don't want to come, then let them explain that to the Guyanese voting population, because it's going to help you who are in government. Right? Those are 2 areas. The other one is for more transparency, and with it comes accountability with regard to the various cash grants that we're giving out. The only one, and Minister
Timothy
was here, and the only one that they have had control and have full accountability for is the school children, because there's an infinite population, or a finite population rather, of school children, so you know how many persons are there that go to school. But how many fishermen are there? How many persons in the hinterland region? How many persons would have received the COVID grant? I can give you my personal example. I have not received a cent from the cash grants in any way.
And you fall in any way in...
Well, I'm supposed some Guyanese citizens at the very least.
No, they're giving they're categorizing it for the COVID grant.
But I don't want to hear about the pink slip and red slip and the different color slips, because it's all a major slip.
Now this is a politician in the making here.
No, thank you very much, Zira. And if you have missed it, this is a must-watch program. I enjoy every minute of it because, I always use the word tolerance when we're talking, and it is not by chance. In this country, we're so diverse. People talk about 6 races. I think it's much more than that. We have to start looking at things differently, out of the box. And here you have a young man who played a big role. I wanted really to touch base on the elections 2020 and the role that he played. Guardians of democracy, he would have been there, and because we interviewed him during those couple months, those 5 months, and he would have played a tremendous role. And I'm hoping that President Their Finale is looking on to, because we have to go back and we have to start paying attention to these people. There were some shining lights that came out of that couple months, and we cannot forget that they would have protected us, and they would have spoken out when times were looking very difficult, when it might have been very dangerous. They stood up and they stood tall. And very eloquent, Dr. Mark France, not unafraid. He's a professional working within the government system, within GPHC. And these are the kind of people. Do not be afraid, play your role, be counted, because this country is ours. These are not things, I'm not a politician when I say that. Freddie Kissoon and I are here 3 days a week. We leave our homes, we plan it, we call people, we liaise. We do this without pay. That is because we want to raise the bar, the kind of conversation that we could have to better this country. And it's good that we have people like Mark France and so many others that we will be bringing from time to time to educate you, to, to titillate your minds, to use Freddie words, wherever you are.
There is I got a text message. There is someone outside waiting for us with a cake. I got a text message. So I thought we would have used it.
Begs for anything, don't.
I thought we would have used it. The other thing, I thought we'd have used it here, but the person said they're waiting in the car outside.
Oh my goodness. So whoever it is, if it is indeed true.
It's true. I got a text.
I want to say thank you, but there was no need. We are all right, but thank you very much for that. So wherever you are, thank you very much. We have had a very good day, and thank you to our co-host Freddie Kissoon, as well as our guest Dr. Mark France, leader of Anug, a new and united Guyana. Have a good night, a good day, good morning, wherever you are.